Hey everybody, Garry Adelman, American Battlefield Trust. Here we are, we're back. We're still here at 157, Gettysburg commemoration anniversary, and we are still on the second day's battlefield. We're on the south end, and we're around the 3rd Corps headquarters. That is Sickles headquarters. The monument behind me might have something to do with that headquarters actions, and Chris Mackowski is going to talk about that soon. You can see maybe a big diamond on it, or if you were looking at it from the side you would, but I want to talk about Dan Sickles' movement. We always talk about his movement out to the peach orchard, but very few people actually look at the reality of that. Look at the craziness that this is. He moves from this position, a half a mile back behind the camera and moves out to the Emmitsburg Road. Everybody knows that, right? But you see that red barn right out there? Imagine his line starting way off to the right of that. He goes past that barn and over past the next road and then over past the next barn, that's Sherfy, and over to that rise over there, the peach orchard. You can also see why he wanted the peach orchard. It's a nice piece of high ground there. That's half his line. Then he bends his line back all the way through those next trees, through the Wheatfield, all the way to Devil's Den. He has no hope with his 10,000 soldiers of manning this line. It was doomed to failure. That is, unless he receives a lot of reinforcements which he does, and that is still not enough. So let's bring on Chris Mackowski to talk about this headquarters and what marker we're standing at, and I'm going to want to show a picture at some point.
So Dan Sickles is odd man out in the high command of the Army of the Potomac. He's the non-West pointer of the bunch. He's a political general connected to the Tammany Hall political machine in New York, and he is radioactive. When he first went to Congress, his wife, a very beautiful woman, has an affair with the son of Francis Scott Key, and Sickles shoots him down in a fit of jealousy, gets off on the temporary insanity defense, but that makes him absolutely radioactive. So when he gets through his political connections, his appointments to military command, and works his way up, he finds himself here in charge of the 3rd Corps. And nobody likes the fact that this political general has risen so high. So there's a lot of tension between him and Army Commander George Gordon Meade in particular, who had nothing but contempt for Sickles. When Sickles makes the move out toward the peach orchard that Garry mentioned earlier, it's against Meade's order. Meade finally tries to come up and sort things out, but says the Confederates are not going to let you give that position up without a fight. And of course, as we've talked about today, Sickles gets that fight in spades. He's here at his headquarters when the battle is erupting, and he's got Kershaw's men coming from the south, even as Barksdale's men begin their advance toward the peach orchard coming from the west. With all this artillery fire coming from over that hill, he's standing here and suddenly feels a sharp sting in his left leg and realizes as he looks down that it's barely hanging on. A cannonball has come, hit him in the leg, nearly taken it off. So he's going to have to leave the field, turn command over to David Bilberny, and in the meantime, he's going to have to be evacuated from the field. He's worried about the effect of morale on his troops, and so the whole reason I wanted to tell this story is because he is jauntily removed from the battlefield smoking a cigar. Just the word jaunty is always used to describe that tale. Now, I can't imagine what it's like to have your leg barely dangling and how jaunty you might feel, but of course with Dan Sickles, the story is everything, and so that's the story he's going to go on to promote. As Chris White likes to say, he can't find a surgeon that'll operate on him because he's so disliked, and he gets a drunken volunteer to take the leg the rest of the way off. And as many of us know, he visits that leg at the Army Medical Museum year after year after year. Now this
was Alexander Webb who said
Alexander Webb who said that, yes.
It wasn't true.
And it was not true.
Tom Sims took off his legs.
And again, with Sickles, it's the story that often matters. This is one of 2 markers that are here at this headquarters. This actually marks the location of his wounding. We'll go down in just a few moments to look at the headquarters marker. But as Sickles said, the whole damn battlefield is my monument, because he worked diligently to set this aside to be a national park. Gary's got a great picture for us to look at.
Yeah, and say what you want about Sickles. He goes back to Congress with the sole purpose of creating the Gettysburg National Military Park. It's the Sickles bill that does it, and he does create the park, or help to. So here's a photo of Dan Sickles. You can see he's the one without the right leg, standing there, and you can see the Trostle barn. We are at almost the exact same angle as it. You could see him here. There's some other notable people here. I'm pretty sure that E. Porter Alexander is right over there, and you have Emmer B. Cope and a bunch of other Gettysburg, actually that's John P. Nicholson and Joseph B. Carr standing right there, but a pretty cool photo that you have right here. I mean, Sickles out outlived all the other major generals on the Union side at Gettysburg, and that makes you a pretty good arguer. Who's going to argue with you about what happened? Indeed. Are you edging back, or should I bring Doug on?
I'm going to just say, let me step back for a moment, which is our key phrase, because I think I did accidentally say his left leg, and it was his right in stance. And Sickles would get that right stump out any chance he could to show that he had given his limb for the Army, and he used it to great political effect to gain sympathy in Washington for his tale of what happened here at Gettysburg. We're going to walk down and look at the headquarters marker, and I'm going to ask Doug Douds to come in and talk about some of the action that takes place.
So thanks, Chris. So one of the things we have out here, once Sickles moves out here, he doesn't have enough men, as Garry said. So one of the things that George Gordon Meade will tap into is the artillery reserve. This is 118 pieces of artillery, not assigned to any unit, but given to the Army of the Potomac. And this is McGilvery's artillery battalion that comes out here, and it's going to extend largely from the peach orchard all the way down what we know is the Wheatfield Road today. In fact, we can look over and you'll see two cedar trees. Right to the right of the cedar tree is going to be the 9th Massachusetts Battery. 9th Massachusetts Battery has a fascinating story. Truth be told, early in the war, they're poorly led. They're stuffed into the defenses of Washington, and it's kind of a crummy unit. And the state of Massachusetts finds a guy named John Bigelow to take command of it. When he takes command of the unit, he's going to start putting the men through their paces. He makes them wear all their uniforms. He has them do all kinds of gunnery drills, including retire by recoil, something that a battery would never do in a battle. Now, ultimately, what's going to happen for Sickles' advance line out here at about 6 o'clock in the evening, as mentioned, Barksdale's Mississippi Brigade will slam into the peach orchard. This will implode this position, and now Union troops are reeling back across this field. And all the batteries that are out on the Wheatfield Road will peel off one at a time. Ultimately, it will be Bigelow's battery who's told to pull back, facing pressure from his front. And what he believes is he doesn't actually have the time to pick up his battery and trot them back into position, so he's going to use this idea of retire by recoil. And the idea is that when the cannon fires, the recoil of the piece would let it go back. They would take the prologue rope around the tail of the gun, hook it to the horses. The horses would then drag it as the men loaded it. When it was ready for the next shot, they would fire it again. They're going to retire by recoil all the way back into this position until they film a semicircle, a half moon, located between the Trostle barn and a stone wall, and behind them is what they would call the gate. Now, they would hold this position and they would be ready to pick up and retire back to the main Union line when all of a sudden Freeman McGilvery will ride up to him and say, "Hey, Bigelow, there's nothing behind you. We have no line. You have to buy us time." And so with that, John Bigelow will now go ahead and have his men break all kind of rules. They're going to bring their artillery ammunition up, stack it next to their guns, and what they're going to try and do is defend this position to the last, buying time for the rest of the Union Army to find some kind of defensive line back behind them.
Now, Doug, let me just show so they can picture it here. Look, there's the house there, and here's a picture taken just 2 or 3 days after this action occurred. And you can see it. Here's where they're going to get penned up. Doug's going to talk about this in a little bit. I can see a picket fence next to the house. I can see a stone fence that's over there too. And they come to a corner, a point over there, and there seems to be no escape except maybe through a gate.
There is this little hole in the stone wall that ultimately they're going to go back through. But if you don't mind, Chris, what we do is just kind of pan around and see what kind of crummy position this is. These guys are in a bowl. This is not commanding fields of fire for which they were brought out here in the first place. And ultimately what they do is, after they get done firing all their canister, because this is a straight artillery versus infantry fight, and that's a crummy fight to be in if you're an artillerist. So they're going to start using shot and shell, cutting their fuses to 0 length so that they explode nearly the second they come out of the tube. They will even get to the point where they're taking solid shot and they are firing it that it bounds over the hill to keep that infantry at bay. Of course, all along this, they're taking losses. We just saw that picture that Garry showed us. They're going to lose 88 of their horses out there. Lieutenant Erickson will be shot through the lungs and refuses to leave. In fact, the bugler for this unit is a guy named Charles Wellington Reed. He's an artist. He actually draws a picture of Erickson issuing orders on July 2nd. And every time he would issue an order, his gunners would have to come so close to his face, and then you could see the blood coming out of his mouth as his lungs were filling with blood. And during this fight, one of Bigelow's gunners, he's about to go over and relieve him, because every time he looks, he sees he's on the ground. How cowardly that would be. Except that he soon realizes is every time the gun discharges and there's a large cloud of smoke, what the gunnery sergeant is doing is getting down low so that he can see beneath the smoke and get an idea of the impact of his rounds, that he might better adjust his gun for the next shot. Now, ultimately, what's going to happen in this, Bigelow will also be hit twice. When finally McGilvery will give him orders that you are free to pull out. One gun will make it through the gate. The next one, as friction happens on a battlefield, will hit the corner of the gate and overturn. The next piece will just drive over the stone wall, and ultimately, this is why Bigelow will lose 4 pieces of artillery. As the rest of the battery is crossing the field, it'll be Charles Wellington Reed that realizes, hey, where's Captain Bigelow? And he'll come back out here and he'll see that he's been severely wounded. He's going to put him back on a horse, and on his own horse, he'll grab his reins and start to ride back to the Union lines when Bigelow goes, "You're going to kill me if we keep this up." So Reed will hop off his horse, he'll grab Bigelow's reins, and he will walk John Bigelow's horse all the way back up the ridgeline. All the gunners back up on the line are going, "Get out of the way, get down!" And he will cautiously walk his young captain, because for the first time he realized all that hard training that they had put in, a paper collar unit from the defenses of Washington, had been designed to prepare them for a day like this. And ultimately, for those actions, Charles Wellington Reed will be awarded the Medal of Honor for what he does on July 2nd. Other thoughts why we're here?
Yeah, definitely more thoughts, but I know Chris is going to point this out, but I hope he doesn't mind me taking it. If we can 180 right here, we have a living witness here. I'm not talking about that guy. I don't know how old he is, honestly, but we have the Sickles tree. We know it was here during the battle. You can see the tip of it in this Alexander Gardner photo. And then the key is, it's not that easy, but we have photos in the early drawings. We have 1880s photos, 1890s photos, 1910 photos, and we all along in the 20th century, and that's it, trust me. And next to that, the official headquarters marker, of course, for the 3rd Corps. Gettysburg's headquarters markers for Corps, at least, for Union or Confederates, are marked by upright cannon barrels. Of course, that's different in other parks. There is no consistency between them. Now, as we approach this area, I want to walk on this side of these guns here. Famously, one of the cannons up here, this is the monument to the 9th Mass, has the 4 letters C-O-R-A sort of painted and scratched into the back of one of the cannon breeches. I don't think anybody knows who she was. Maybe she's the darling of the unit. Doug, if anybody knows, come out and say it. And then here we have the monument itself. Now, I want to go past this monument here and focus on this next one, because you see cars driving by, people drive by all the time, and what do they see? A monument that says, "Monument on Culp's Hill." What in the world does that mean? You really needed to put up a stone for just this? That doesn't make any sense. And one more thing, Chris, if you don't mind, if you can back up a little bit, this photo that I showed you earlier as it is, I'll point your attention to 2. It looks like 1 rock, but it's really 2. That is this rock next to us here, and that smaller rock right there. So you can see the dead horses littering the ground right around here. And once you know this, you can actually see, there's the fence corner. Look, there's the house. The addition they were working on in the house is now complete. And you can see exactly where the fence corner was. So I like to stand here, look at this picture, and imagine the 2 guns of Bigelow's battery, sort of trying to escape. The reason I wanted to talk about this monument here is to take you around to the other side, if you can climb up here, Chris, because if you start looking on the other side of this wall, you see, you line up the old pictures. This is where the road was. People used to see Bigelow's guns from the back, and therefore people used to also see this monument from the back. So the nicer plaque is in fact right here. People were meant to see this is the front of the monument. Therefore, now that they moved the road, again, because they had hairpin turns and things like that, they moved the monument, and now you have a beautiful plaque that a whole lot of people don't get to see. So I wanted to point out a couple of things there about the moved road and other things like that. I have another photo to point out real quick, if you'll follow me out here, because I think people like it. This isn't the highest quality photo, but it is famous. So I am going to go ahead and just leave it right about here. This is some of the same horses looking toward the Trostle barn. You see it right there. Let me move it up a little bit here. I think it'll be better. And then if you look away, you can maybe see the early damage to the battlefield, and there it is. You can see the damage below one of the diamonds over there. And what's interesting is that this rock, it looks like it's a couple rocks, but this rock right there, you see it almost looks like a little whale. There it is, right in the fence, right there where it should be. When there are rocks on battlefields, that is photo lineup gold that we like to use. So that's most of what I have to say. Doug, Chris?
I'll take one last shot. So one of the ideas, too, of if you think about the soldiers and the commitment that they had to this battlefield, Charles Wellington Reed was an artist of some repute. Not only would he have multiple drawings that actually cover the action, we even see Sickles' headquarters tree as batteries go into position from this, but he was also the one that came back and helped carve the monument on this side. So there's the original position the 9th Massachusetts Battery starts in. When they get back here, this second monument was carved by Charles Wellington Reed himself with his own hands to mark the ground that he had helped fight for and defend on July 2nd. Other thoughts, Chris?
One of the major repercussions of Sickles' wounding is that it's going to throw things into further turmoil for the Union command down here on the south end of the field. Meade is going to look to the man who has been really guiding the action, Winfield Scott Hancock, and this is really when Hancock is going to begin to shine. He's on the field, running the 2nd Corps, and he's now suddenly given this really big bag of awful 3rd Corps mess that he's also got to try to be in charge of. But that turns out to be a great thing for the Union Army, because then Hancock actually serves as a wing commander for the left wing of the Union Army, which then is able to allow him to coordinate response much more effectively. Right now, they've been throwing in brigades, regiments, trying to do piecemeal sort of patchwork, band-aid stuff. Now, with Hancock's steady leadership, things are going to start to settle in for the Union, just as this major Confederate attack is finally coming to its climax. So it turns out to be, in many ways, a fortuitous stroke of luck for the Union Army that Hancock is able to then assume some command. Gary?
That's really cool. And he even signs at least one of his orders, commanding left center at Gettysburg. It's pretty interesting. I mean, he may have seen himself in charge of the 5th Corps as well, from some of what I've heard. Now, I think we're going to wrap it up right here, so we appreciate you sticking with us. I know you're enjoying our videos. If you enjoy the videos, if you say you appreciate what we do, and then get involved with the American Battlefield Trust. It could be as simple as signing up for one of our email lists. So just go to battlefields.org and sign up for our emails. You'll start to get all sorts of information, and you'll also get some opportunities to help us preserve some land. Maybe join the American Battlefield Trust. Come to some of our events. Get to come to a teacher institute if you're an educator, or tell an educator about some of our stuff. So how about if instead of giving our normal sign-off, I can ask Chris to come back to the back of this gun and actually focus on one of the few named cannon tombs of the Civil War. Thanks for watching.